In this video, I'm going to teach you how to not get absolutely cooked by the SAT reading section. Everybody makes videos about the math section, but nobody makes videos about reading. And this is really weird since, according to my research, way more students get bodied by the reading section than by math. So today I'm going to show you every single strategy, every single question type, and basically everything you need to master the SAT reading section. Most people would charge literally hundreds of dollars for what I'm about to say in this video, but I'm going to give it away completely for free and bankrupt the whole industry. First, let's talk about standard English conventions. These are grammar questions. Basically, the SAT asks, can you write a sentence that isn't trash? It sounds simple. It isn't. People who have spoken English their entire lives still manage to fail this. So in this video, I'm going to cover every single rule you need. What you're about to see is a chopped up version of the grammar video for my full course, the 14-day SAT rescue plan. If you want my full strategy to prepare for the SAT in less than 2 weeks, links in description, but that's where this video is from. Semicolons. They separate two independent clauses. What are independent clauses? They're clauses that can exist fully on their own. I tried to study for the SAT, my brain said no. Both of these sentences can exist perfectly fine on their own. You can also use commas for lists. I say math, reading, and writing. You can also have this thing called compound lists. Say you say, I struggled with the passage about mitochondria, photosynthesis, and gene editing, the math questions involving exponential growth, rate problems, and weird graphs, and the writing section full of punctuation rules, tone shifts, and passive voice contractions. There are 3 things in each of those elements of the list, and so instead you have to use semicolons for the main separations and then commas for the mini separations, basically. Now just regular commas some more. Commas basically separate an independent clause and a dependent clause. Dependent clauses are ones that cannot exist on their own. So look at this. If I don't study today, I'm gonna bomb the math section. But if there's a case where it's 2 independent clauses, you have to use a comma with a word like and or but or so. Basically these fanboys. That's for, and, nor, but, or yet so. I can't focus when my little brother's yelling, but I try anyways. This is supposed to be a hyphen. It represents unnecessary information. When I say unnecessary information, I don't mean information that is pointless. I mean information that you don't need to be able to understand the sentence well enough. So look at this, the SAT reading section, no joke, is actually kind of fun once you know what to look for. Hyphens separate this part, no joke, and you need a hyphen on both sides of it. So essentially whenever you have a subject and a verb, you have to have the same, essentially plurality, the same person for both of them. It just means making sure there's the same number. Each verb can either be for one thing or be for multiple things, and the same thing for each subject. The student wants to cry during the SAT. Both of these words are singular. Student is just one student, and then wants is for if it's only one. Now you have students want to cry during the SAT. These are now plural. Multiple students, they all want to cry. But it can also get a little bit more weird. So the pack of wild SAT takers is running late. Keep in mind, these are multiple people. There are multiple SAT takers, but there's only one pack. So this is the subject. And so since the pack is only one pack, you do have to use this singular verb, which is in this case. Then you have that my calculator and brain are fried. In this case, you're talking about 2 different things, my calculator and the brain, so it has to be are, which is the plural as well. Okay, then we have some stuff on active versus passive voice. Essentially, if a sentence is talking in active voice, it has a subject doing the action. If it's talking in passive voice, it has the action being done on the subject. So look at this, the student destroyed the SAT. The student is the thing destroying. But then you have the SAT was destroyed by the student. The SAT was being destroyed, so essentially that was having an action done on it rather than it doing the action, and the action is being destroyed. Let me just talk about pronouns real quick. Essentially pronouns, you'd have to know whether it's gonna be singular or plural. So if you have a pronoun that's he, that's singular, and the same for she, it, those are all singular pronouns. And so as a result, you have to keep the same kind of thing going with the verbs, making sure that they are singular verbs if you're using a singular pronoun. But you also have to keep in mind the word they. For the SAT, you have to use they only as meaning plural. They ace the reading section that's talking about multiple people, and that's what it would have to be. Parallel usage of words. I like studying, eating, and crying. That's parallel because they all end in the ing. No changes, they're all the exact same. But look at this sentence. I like studying, to eat, and crying. You have 2 words with the ing, but then you have 1 word that is to eat. And so this would actually be incorrect. You cannot use that on the sentence. Modifiers, grabbing the practice test, I noticed it was already filled out. Versus grabbing the practice test, it was already filled out. Think about this, grabbing the practice test. What was grabbing the practice test? I was grabbing the practice test. So as a result, it has to be, this is the correct one, essentially, the one up here. But this one, look at this, grabbing the practice test, it was already filled out. It is the practice test. It was not grabbing the practice test, if that makes sense. It is the practice test, at least how it's being said. So like this would not be correct because it's like when you say grabbing the practice test, it basically implies that the next word will be what was grabbing the practice test, not just a word that describes the practice test. Apostrophes. If a word is describing something that is owned by someone else, you use the apostrophe S. If you're describing something that's a plural possessive, like, multiple people own something, it's S apostrophe. If there's a person whose name ends in S and it's possessive, it's S apostrophe S. The student's score was impressive. That's pretty simple. The students' backpacks were stolen. This implies that there were multiple students. So it's not like there's just one student with multiple backpacks. There are multiple different students, and you can tell that because it has a S apostrophe. But then you have Lucas's backpack was stolen. Lucas is just one person, and since his name begins with an S, you just add an apostrophe S on it. There is like, I'm pointing over there, for example, you're pointing to something far away. There is owners, like their backpacks, and then there is they are. They are smart. The final thing, be familiar with verb tense. Is and are present tense, so that means the verb is happening right now. He is doing work. He's doing work right now. Was, were means past. He was smart implies he's not smart anymore. Ed also means past. He gained experience. That means that he gained experience in the past. Have, has been. These are like a little bit more weird because it's like past to present. He has been running for a while. That implies that he started running in the past, but that he still is running in the present. Then you have will, which means they will do something in the future. So now let's actually show how to do these questions. The first thing you want to do when you see a standard English conventions question is look at the answer choices. The point of this is basically just to determine what the answer choice probably is going to have to be. Then actually read the sentence, and your goal with this should be to essentially think for yourself what the answer choice probably is going to have to be without looking at the answer choices while you do it. So essentially just predict the answer even though you have some knowledge of what it kind of has to be. For this sentence, the word creators makes a lot of sense just without any other punctuation, and as you would guess, yes, that is the correct answer. Now see if you can figure out this one using the same strategy. The number one rule of standard English convention problems is don't gaslight yourself. If the sentence looks correct, it probably is. Students mainly lose points here because 1, they didn't know the grammar rule behind it, or 2, they didn't read the question carefully enough. That's literally it. There's no SAT wizardry, there's no hidden tricks. These are the only 2 reasons. And so your goal with these questions should be nearly 100% accuracy. There are a lot harder questions on the reading section. You should not be missing these if you have the ability not to. Next is transitions. Basically, you have to determine if 2 sentences agree or disagree with each other. If they agree, use a similarity word. If they fight, put in a word like however and move on. Here you can see a list of contradictory words like however, but yet, in contrast, and then similarity and addition words. These can mean anything that has some kind of agreement to them. Anything that doesn't directly contradict with each other should be these. Now there are some other words that aren't listed here, but these are the main ones you'll be seeing on the SAT again and again. When you see these problems, don't read the answer choices first, just immediately start by reading over the passage. And after you do that, essentially just predict what the answer choice will be, similarly to how you did with the SEC ones, and then see which answer choice you're given is most similar to the one you had guessed originally. So you can see if you read the sentence, you essentially need a word that somewhat contradicts to this first part here. The clip was directed at fellow meme enjoyers worldwide. So something that kind of contradicts with it, maybe not entirely, but something that has a little bit of a difference. So I would guess ultimately for here. Also one of the choices, so that's definitely going to be correct for this problem. You can also give a shot at this one using the same exact strategy. The big thing with these problems is becoming familiar with the different kinds of transitions. You're not really going to do that well if you just try to memorize a list of transition words. You actually have to understand how they're used in the average sentence if you want to get these right most of the time. So the big thing is just to do a bunch of practice problems and get super familiarized with how these problems typically work. Now on to notes questions. This is where the SAT pretends some random student scribbled notes and you have to figure out which choice actually uses them the best. This is pretty easy, assuming you don't overthink it. So look at this problem. Sure, it looks super confusing, there's a bunch of information up here, you have to figure out all this different stuff, but here's a helpful trick for these problems. You almost never actually need to read the notes. All you have to do is read over the question and then pay careful attention to try to find the choice that most answers the question. When I say most answers the question, I mean which one really adheres to the contours of what the question is asking. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information to accomplish this goal of presenting the aim of the study. So a bunch of these are going to be kind of correct, but the only one that actually talks about the aim of the study is this one because it's the only one that says what they're trying to do, better understand the social function of sea shanties. This one says what the researchers actually did. This one also says basically what they actually did and what they found. And this is also what they learned from the study. Only choice A actually explains the goal of the study in the first place. And as you can see, I did not need to read the notes at all to answer this question. Oh, also, by the way, if you're still watching, subscribe. I mean, please, this video literally took me over 10 hours to make. The least I'm just asking you for is to click that subscribe button. Oh, and if you don't, you're gonna get an 1100. Words in context. These are the vocab questions. The SAT either gives you a blank and asks you to pick the word that actually fits, or choose the word that's most similar to the word already in the passage. Most students think these problems are just random guessing, but that's wrong. Okay, so don't get me wrong, if you know what the vocab words actually mean, these questions are extremely easy. But there will always be times when you see words you're just not familiar with. So what do you do in that situation? Well, essentially you just have to try to eliminate any words that you know can't be it. College students typically try to improve their study habits, but research by the Dana Kim, Luz Romero, and Pira Shah suggests that some do not blank their routines. Boosted by this, but 30% never use the tools. So basically they're talking about how most college students are just really bad at studying. Did not blank their routines. We're basically trying to find a word that says did not make the best use of their routines or did not make them as good as they could be. Adorn. When you see a choice like this that you may not know, you just want to essentially think what the word looks like it's saying and what the roots and the prefixes and the suffixes might indicate. So adorn, it doesn't give you that much information, but you have this orn part that kind of looks like the word ornament, you know, like you hang on a Christmas tree and stuff. So it kind of makes it seem like something about designs, making something better than it is right now. So that could work, but do people really adorn their routines? Do people like make them more pretty? I mean, not really that often, so I would probably eliminate that one. Then you have optimize. You can just think opta essentially means best, essentially saying to make better, if we just assume based off of what this prefix looks like, so probably going to be it. Endorse. Dorse essentially means the back of something. So you could guess that this kind of means, you know, to get behind, to support something that isn't supported right now. So again, doesn't really make sense for the passage. And then finally, counteract. You could probably guess this one. Counter essentially means to go against, to fight something. And act just means to do something. They're not counteracting their study routines, so the answer is pretty clearly B for this. The best strategy to improve your ability at these vocab questions is really just to do a lot of them to become more familiarized with the words that typically appear, and also to learn different roots, prefixes, and suffixes so you can go through the strategy I just went through. A good way to get started on this is through this free vocab roots guide that I have available in my Skool community with a link in the description. You can access it basically immediately if you just join the community, and it really helps a lot. I even have a Quizlet deck that has all the vocabulary roots. You can study them very easily. There are other ways to study vocab, but at the end of the day, most of them aren't really that effective. So I would say the best thing you can do is just become more familiarized with these problems and learn the roots, prefixes, and suffixes. Now onto the final boss fight, reading passage questions. These are the questions that actually ask you to figure out something about what the passage is saying. They range from what's the main idea to what's the point of this random sentence that nobody cared about. So how should you approach an average reading passage question? The first thing you should do is read over what the question is actually asking. This is pretty simple, but it can save some time because it allows you to essentially not get as confused while you're reading the passage. Then when you're actually reading the passage, the key thing is making sure that you're reading it in a way that you'll actually be able to understand what is being said. One thing that can help a lot is just taking notes on the main ideas. So for example, this passage is talking about a pizza topping census conducted by these two researchers, and they found that 26%, nearly triple, were reported by this other one. So you can just basically say, you know, this C, like CEN for census, and it showed that 26% pineapple. So like that's what I would put for there. And maybe I would say that, you know, this one was in 2018, and then you had one in 2008, basically just a third of the amount that was in the 2018 one. Then the rest of the passage basically talks about why this may be the case. Essentially talks about how this new census considered a bunch of different factors for the pineapple that weren't considered in the original one, so they had kind of an inflated amount that maybe wasn't actually that true. So I might just put like in parentheses here, you know, different factors or something like that. So essentially what you want to do is look at each of the answer choices, eliminate any of the ones you feel you can just easily eliminate, and then if you have to, go back to the passage to just clarify what's being said. The key thing you want to avoid doing is making inferences or making guesses about what the passage is saying that's not actually supported by the passage. So yeah, this one is talking about they included pineapple infused sauces and garnishes. That seems like it's probably going to be correct, but let's just look at the other ones. This one talks about pepperoni, so that's definitely not at all what's being said, so we can eliminate that one. This one talks about differences in pizza size, so that could be correct, but that's not really what's being talked about. They're talking about counting pizzas with different pineapple chunks, so they never really talk about the size of it, so we can eliminate that one. And this one just talks about mushrooms, so you know, just get out of there. So we know this is gonna have to be A. That's a pretty simple one. Let's talk about a harder one now. This one, we're looking for the main idea of the text. So essentially notes can be very helpful for this, but here's another strategy. When you're reading over the passage, you can essentially just highlight the main details that need to be seen while you're going through the passage. Educators worldwide are exploring innovative strategies to help keep students engaged. I can just say educators exploring strategies to keep students engaged. Approaches that integrate play or competition can help. To declining math test scores, introduced a game-based learning activities. They allowed students to solve puzzles collaboratively while earning points and rewards. Higher participation and improved test scores. So sure, I highlighted a bunch of different stuff, but this still helps a lot because now I'm only having to focus on the stuff that was actually highlighted. I don't have to worry about any of this other stuff. I can almost just eliminate it mentally in my mind. And so now when I see the answer choices, I can pretty easily just go back to the passage and determine which one is going to be correct. So let's look at these choices now. So first we see the importance of collaboration improving education. That's probably too specific because we're not really talking just about collaboration. We're talking about all these different things with gamification. So A is probably going to be incorrect. B, game-based approaches can be effective to achieve educational goals. That seems pretty good. Then C, as indicated, classroom puzzles help students participate more actively in math lessons. So this is pretty good, but it doesn't really talk about, the game-based elements of it at all. It feels like there's a bunch of details that are kind of being glossed over. Not to mention, we're talking about the main idea of this text. So this is just a small portion, like the research study that they did. It's not really the main idea of what is being said in this entire passage. Now, finally, we have D. Educators now realize that game-based learning methods offer better long-term outcomes than traditional teaching methods do. This definitely seems like it could be pretty good, but there are a few problems with it. We just really want to find why this choice may not be correct. And if there's even a small part of this choice that may not be necessarily correct, we can eliminate it. So first, to think about long-term outcomes. We don't really talk about the long-term outcomes as a whole. We talk about kind of short-term things that they can gain from doing these tests. I would say D is not the best answer and B is correct. Now keep in mind, D may be a completely logically true answer. It's just not the correct one based off of the information in the passage. So for these main idea questions, you're more trying to look for one that is directly supported by what is being said in the passage and that also says the key claim that puts the entire passage together, not just a small part that is maybe in one area but not others. Common answer choices that should be eliminated include ones that are really extreme, like saying something happens all the time when in actuality the passage only said happens a decent amount of time. Answer choices that are just completely contradicted by the passage or not supported at all. And choices that answer your question but not the question that was actually being asked. And now let me talk to you about the most important method for going through these reading passage questions. After you read the passage, your goal should be to essentially predict what the answer choice is likely going to be. Similarly to how we did for transition questions, basically make the guess of what the answer choice would have to be before you even look at the answer choices. This will essentially prevent you from being in these situations where you read and then you see these answer choices and then you get kind of confused and think that one answer choice has to be it when another one also seems right. Instead, it will kind of prime your brain to just choose the one that automatically makes the most sense, which typically ends up being the correct answer anyways. So if you read this passage, you can see that it's talking about there are these patches of ink fading, and then they talk about these different things that can't be it, like sunlight can't be it, and repeated spills of water or wine could also not be it because, these different reasons. And then it also finally explains a reason that actually may explain the process rather than these other two. So you have to talk about this discovery of stuff in this cave, explain two reasons that may not actually explain it, and then finally explain a reason that may explain it. Only one of these choices actually has that as being the answer choice. I'll give you a second to try to think if you can see it. It's going to be C. It introduces a preservation problem, refutes two potential explanations, and it presents a third explanation. But you see, if you did not go through that process of predicting before you looked at the answer choices, you could easily think it was A. Or you could even think that it was B. Or you could even think that that's D. Because all those kind of look correct, but only one specifically talks about what is being said in the passage itself in a way that makes sense. So now let me just drop some tips for some random reading passage questions you might see on the test. If it's a passage with a scientific experiment, find the hypothesis of the experiment and see if the results contradict or support that hypothesis. And the answer choice will probably be the one that talks about whether it supports or doesn't support it. If you get data like a graph or a table and you have to make some kind of observation about it, first identify the claim that's trying to be made by the passage, check the graph or table for data that supports or disproves it, and find whatever answer choice best summarizes whether it supports or disproves it. If you're reading something from like a novel or a poem, try to find the main theme or idea from that poem or novel, and then find the answer choice that best sums it up. For questions with inferences, if they ever say the word therefore, that means the next sentence must support whatever is being said. If they ever say something like although, the next sentence must contradict what is being said before. In cross-text connections, usually one passage either supports or disagrees with the other. Determine which one it is and find the answer choice that best supports that. So now let me tell you the thing that no other SAT YouTuber wants to tell you. There are essentially no other ways to approach these kinds of SAT problems. The stuff I said in this video are essentially the only methods for actually getting through these SAT passage problems. Everything else about making sure you're better at choosing the right answer and determining these traps that you may often fall into only can come from doing a lot of these in practice. As long as you follow the methods said in this video, you'll naturally learn all these other ways to solve these problems and all these other tiebreakers to determine what the correct answer has to be. But you'll only discover that by doing a lot of practice problems. There's no special technique that always works to get the right answer for reading passage questions. And if you think there is, you're lying to yourself. So that's basically all of SAT reading. If you still haven't subscribed, what are you even doing at this point? Smash that button.